Now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, please.
Our hospitals are under massive pressure. Record waiting lists, a year-round trolley crisis and embedded problems within recruitment and retention mean the health service is creaking at the seams, and nowhere is this pressure more acutely felt than at University Hospital Limerick. Yesterday there were 143 patients on trolleys at the hospital, and today people are urged to avoid the emergency department with scheduled surgeries having been deferred at that hospital while staff struggle to deal with the high levels of overcrowding. Of course, this is nothing new for the people of Limerick or the wider region. Last month, an incredible 2,247 people were treated on trolleys at University Hospital Limerick. That's the highest number on record for any hospital for any month ever. Sadly, a state of permanent and everyday crisis is now the norm. At University Hospital Limerick, the full capacity protocols are in almost perpetual operation. Elderly patients, children and very vulnerable people are treated on trolleys in dangerous conditions. It's treatment without privacy and without dignity. Recently, my colleague Maurice Quinlivan had to intervene for a 71-year-old stroke patient who was on a trolley for 8 days at University Hospital Limerick. We can only imagine the distress of that patient and their poor family as they looked on feeling helpless. Taoiseach, the emergency department at University Hospital Limerick is the only emergency department servicing a population of 400,000 people in the region. And the crisis in the hospital didn't happen by accident. It's a direct result of decisions taken by successive governments. The closure of emergency departments at Nina and Ennis, the refusal to properly fund GP and community health services, and the failure to develop the required capacity at the hospital have all heaped unsustainable pressure on heroic frontline staff who do incredible work in dire circumstances. There are significant staffing gaps in the hospital. There's an urgent need to fill non-consultant doctor posts and to immediately increase nursing and medical staff in the emergency department. Tá roflódú contourtuch in ospedéal na hoscoile limnach imethe ó smacht fad. Ní mór ag an rialtas gníomhú ag an dóla a hógáil loireach. Without urgent action to build capacity at University Hospital Limerick, the situation will get even worse, and that is not acceptable. Taoiseach, we're short 1,000 beds in hospitals across the state. And yes, despite appalling overcrowding at University Hospital Limerick and throughout our hospital network, your government refuses to fund the 1,500 rapid build beds that were promised on 3 separate occasions last year. And worse still, you've put in place a recruitment freeze, which only adds to the crisis. The people of Limerick and the Midwest deserve much better. So I want to ask you, what emergency action will you now take to the worsening crisis at University Hospital Limerick? Will you now fund the promised 1,500 rapid build beds and roll them into the system? And will you end, Taoiseach, the disastrous recruitment embargo?
Thanks, Deputy. First of all, I want to acknowledge that our hospitals all around the country are under a lot of pressure. That's correct. It's driven in part by rising population, by increasing frailty, by more older people and the availability of more treatments. And I know that patients are experiencing conditions in some parts of the country that they shouldn't have to experience. And I know that a lot of staff are working under enormous pressure at the moment, and we offer them our thanks from this House. But I do have to, as is almost always the case every Tuesday and Wednesday, Deputy, is to correct some misinformation which you stated in your question. And I think increasingly, as is the case with some international politicians, media outlets need to tag on to most of what you say the term without evidence or without proof, because increasingly you say things that are misinformation, and they get broadcast on the news, and it's never said that it's misinformation. And I think it's important that media outlets take account of that. First of all, you said that our waiting lists are at a record high. They're not, Deputy. Waiting lists have fallen now for 2 full years in a row, and this will be the 3rd year in which waiting lists in Ireland fall. We have more beds. We have more than 1,000 extra beds since this government was formed, acute day beds and also community beds. And far from an recruitment embargo, we've seen a big increase in recruitment. We've never had more people working in our public health service than is the case now. We have 8,000 more staff hired last year alone. The HSE can hire another 2,000 to 3,000 staff this year. And we had confirmation today that almost 2,000 consultants have signed the new Saunter Care contract, about 44% and more every day, which is encouraging. In fact, taking doctors alone, whereas we used to be below the OECD average in terms of doctors per head, we now have 4 doctors per 1,000 population. That's more than Australia. It's more than the US. It's more than France. It's more than lots of other countries. And just what you're saying, Deputy, often constitutes misinformation. I think it's important that I say that so that people know that, and it needs to be reported on as well, in my view. In relation to overcrowding in our hospitals, we have about 390 patients this morning who are waiting for a bed. That's a lot. It's too many. It is lower than we would typically see this time of year compared to recent previous years. And it is important to say that most of those patients will be in a bed by this evening. And in some hospitals, there are no patients on trolleys at all, including Waterford and Tullamore, to give just 2 examples. In Limerick, as we all know, there is a particular challenge. And as I always say, what's required to eliminate hospital overcrowding is adequate resources and capacity, good clinical leadership, strong management, and also a comprehensive approach has to be taken. It's not just about UHL, which you acknowledged, it's also about Johns and Ennis, Nina, and community services too. We are making significant investments in the hospital. The budget for the hospital increased by 45% in just the past 4 years. 50 extra beds have been opened across the group, and 98 of these have been in UHL since 2020. Staff has increased by over 1,000 under this government, so from 2,800 to 3,800, and that includes 140 more doctors, 45 more consultants, 340 more nurses and midwives, and 84 more health and social care professionals. And we currently are building a new block which will provide 98 additional beds next year, and are working on a further additional block to be added after that.
So your position seems to be, Taoiseach, that actually there's no problem at University Hospital Limerick. I mean, you've just recounted for me, in your view, a huge record of success and adequate investment. That seems to be your position. The reality on the ground, of course, is very different. I recounted for you the story of a 71-year-old stroke patient who was on a trolley for 8 days. You've heard in the chamber before other stories of people left in the most atrocious and distressing of circumstances. So the problem is very, very real. The problem is related to capacity. It is related to bed capacity. The problem is related to staffing levels. The problem is related to the embargo or the staff control framework that is in action. And if you talk to anybody who is a patient at the hospital or has a loved one relying on service from that hospital, if you talk to anybody who works in the hospital, they will tell you that that is the case. It is very clear that the additional bed capacity is needed within the hospital network, and it is needed as a matter of urgency. So can I put my question to you again? 1,500 rapid build beds have been promised 3 times on 3 separate occasions. They have not been delivered. When will they be delivered? And how will you face up to the crisis that is rolling out day in, day out at University Hospital Limerick?
Thanks, Deputy. As is ever the case on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, your questions contain examples of misinformation, and then your follow-up contains misrepresentation. And I think that needs to be called out, and I certainly think it needs to be analysed and reported on a little bit more. The problems that are occurring in the emergency department in University Hospital Limerick are very real, very real. Everyone who's visited there, and I've been there in the old ED, the new ED, visited hospitals many times, I know that, as does every TD and senator from the region, and you know that too. And it is about capacity, it's about clinical leadership, it's about management, and it's about taking a comprehensive approach that says that it is about more than the hospital itself, and also the other hospitals in the region and community services too. What have we done about it, Deputy? Since this government was formed, 1,000 more staff in UHL, a 45% increase in budget, and an additional 98 beds. And we're currently constructing a new ward block of 96 beds. That'll be complete by Q1 of next year. And we're planning for a further 96 beds, with planning having been granted only at the end of last year. There's also developments in other hospitals like the Minor Injury Unit in Ennis, developments in Nina as well, the building of a private hospital, the Bon Secours Hospital, which will be of some use as well too.
Taoiseach, once again the RTE soap opera is distracting vital attention from the disastrous situation facing those who are at the mercy of our broken housing system. Right now, Taoiseach, 13,531 people are recorded as homeless, including more than 4,000 children. And 18,000 homes are being advertised for short lets on Airbnb, while just 2,000 are available on daft.ie for longer-term rents. Rents are skyrocketing, far in excess of the legal limits under rent pressure zone legislation, and prospective home buyers in Dublin now need, on average, a combined salary of €127,000, far more than median incomes in Ireland. So the cost to so many and the cost to our society of this overshambles cannot be overstated, this omni-shambles, I should say. And indeed, Taoiseach, I recently spoke and heard from a man in his 60s who's been on the housing list for decades. He was taken off the list after he got married because his family income had risen over the limit by just €100. Subsequently, his spouse had to stop working to provide care for a family member, and they went back on the list. And after some difficulty, today they are renting with the housing assistance payment. But this man, who's now retired, has been told by a council official that he will not get a home for more than 12 years. In his own words, "I will be dead before we get a place." So he and his partner remain in fear of eviction. They have no housing security into older age. And Taoiseach, his is just one story, but it's an important one to tell because his experience underscores the desperate need for action. And it shows the turmoil caused by your government's broken housing model. Tomorrow morning, there's a chance for change. This House will debate a Labour Party motion which sets out a clear plan to change policy and to change approach, to ensure delivery of homes to buy and to ensure stronger protection for those renting. Because a change in approach is badly needed. Your policies are lacking, your reactions are slow and your ambition is too low. Even the plans, Taoiseach, that you have in place are just not working. They're seriously wanting. And indeed, this morning I reviewed what capital went unspent by your government in 2023 on housing. And something struck me immediately. Once again, the Minister for Housing did not spend his capital budget. In fact, he underspent it by €141 million. And based on average construction costs, with that money, the department could have delivered more than 450 extra homes last year. Spending on the Secure Tenancies Affordable Rental Scheme also fell short by €20 million, or about 100 extra cost rental homes which could have been delivered. And we see similar underspends on urban renewal and regeneration and on public housing. So Taoiseach, the policies you have and the over-reliance on the private sector, these policies are incapable of delivering the homes we need. And it seems you're not spending enough, even on the schemes you do have in place. So Taoiseach, my questions are, what are you doing for renters, such as older renters, trapped in insecurity into older age? And what are you doing to tackle the disproportionate levels of short-term lettings, to bring Airbnbs back into the housing market? And finally, why has the Minister for Housing consistently failed to spend his capital budget each year since he took office, with the resulting under-delivery of so many homes that could have been supplied?
Housing for All is working. We're building more homes than at any point since 2008, and we're building more social housing than at any point since the 1970s. Tá níos mó tithe a thógáil a going ná ag 1 puinte ó 28. Tá níos mó tithe sosialta a thógáil a going ná 1 pointe ó na seascadaí. Every week now, 500 people are drawing down their first ever mortgage. That's the most since 2007. Tá 500 daoine ag ceannach a chéad gach seachtain an líon ismó ó 27. Támad ag cur cías míosa áis a bhócha daoine tríd an gradus connacht a cíasa €750 dohuini éinear, €1,500 de lánún nó os ceann 2,000 de fhror ag rint. We're putting a month's rent back in people's pockets through the rent tax credit, and €750 for an individual, €1,500 for a couple, over €2,000 for 3 people who are sharing. The LDA is now making progress and is building affordable homes to rent and buy all over Ireland. Despite this progress, we know change is not coming quickly enough, so we will publish new, more ambitious targets for home building, and I promise that we'll leave no stone unturned. Tá dul chun cinn ó dhéanamh ag an LDA inis. Tá sé ag tógáil tithe in acfanna le ligean cías nó le ceannach fud na hÉireann. Tá aníonn an ggóil chun cinn seo, agus leis agam nach bhfuil sé ag teacht go tapa go leor. Mar sin fáil seoimid spricen an nua níos olbhaní maidir le tógáil tithe, agus galam dit nach dogmid cloch gan casú. In terms of the Labour Party motion that's on the floor this week, Cabinet gave it consideration today. We've decided not to oppose it and to allow it to pass. We don't agree with all aspects of the motion, but we do agree with the broad thrust of it. The motion recommends that we should increase our housing targets to 50,000 a year. We don't think that's achievable necessarily this year or next, but we do think it is achievable, and we think that is an ambition that we can share. The motion calls for the tenant in situ scheme to be scaled up. That's been a big success, and we agree that it should be scaled up so that we're buying properties off landlords who are leaving the market and allowing HAP tenants to become regular social housing tenants. And the motion expresses frustration with how long it's taking to get EU clearance for the changes we want to make in relation to short-term lets, to restrict them in our cities where demand for housing is so great. In relation to the Department of Housing, there hasn't been an underspend this year. Minister Bryan was able to move funding from one area to another, but all within the housing and local government remit, and that isn't unusual. So, for example, using some funding to reduce development levies to make the cost of building lower.
Well, Taoiseach, I welcome the news that you're not opposing the Labour motion, and that is welcome. That is constructive. But I will say this. It will be an empty gesture not to be putting down a government counter-motion if in fact there's no movement and no delivery and no attempt to implement the important measures that we've proposed. And I do agree with you when you say change is not coming quickly enough, and it's good to hear government acknowledge that, but you're acknowledging it as if you're a bystander. You're the Taoiseach, you're a Taoiseach of a government that's now been in office for 4 years, and yet you're still saying to me changes are not coming quickly enough, you're still promising the publication of new, more ambitious targets, but it's months ago that you acknowledged that the targets in Housing for All are simply too low. And I would fundamentally disagree with you, as I think with most people in the country, when you say that Housing for All is working. It's patently not working. Níl sé ag obair, Taoiseach. It's simply not working for renters like the man who I heard from, who faces a fear of eviction into his 60s and no prospect of a home of his own, a secure home of his own. And it's not working for all of those people who cannot find an affordable place to rent and yet are deeply frustrated when they see the number of short-term lettings advertised on platforms like Airbnb. So Taoiseach, here's a direct question, and it's in our Labour motion. What are you going to do to regulate short-term lettings? It's not good enough simply to sit back and wait to see what happens at EU level. What are you doing creatively to tackle and regulate the over-preponderance of short-term lettings in our housing market?
Thanks, Deputy. The context in which we are dealing with the housing crisis is one of a rapidly rising population and also changing demographics, smaller households, therefore requiring more houses and apartments. We are running up an escalator that is coming down at us and quite fast, but we are making progress. More than 30,000 new homes built last year, the highest since 2008, and we'll build even more this year. first-time buyers, 500 first-time buyers every week drawing down their first mortgage. Haven't seen that since the Celtic Tiger period. More social housing being built than at any point in the 1970s, and very much needed it is. We see the LDA now is starting to produce results, building cost rental and affordable homes for purchase all over the city and in other parts of the country too. And in relation to short-term letting, we want to restrict it and restrict it significantly, not in tourist areas, but in our cities in particular, where there is enormous demand for housing. And that is currently being held up by the European Commission, but it's something that we're pursuing.
Oh, Deputy McBarry.
Taoiseach, I want to talk to you about your planned visit to the United States next week. Now, the World Health Organization was unable to visit hospitals in Gaza in November, December, January and part of February. Only recently has it been able to restart this work. To date, it has discovered 15 children in those hospitals who had starved to death. The United Nations tells us that 500,000 people in Gaza are now just one step away from starvation. Hundreds of those people gathered in Gaza City last Thursday morning before the dawn. As they moved towards the aid trucks carrying flour, they were gunned down by Israeli soldiers. 115 people died. More than 700 people were injured. It was a massacre. The IDF say that the majority were killed in a stampede and died under the wheels of the aid trucks. But UN observers who saw dead bodies said that they saw a lot of people riddled with bullet holes. Where did the IDF get those guns and those bullets? Much of it, most likely, from the United States. Between October 7 and Christmas Day, 230 cargo planes full of weapons and 20 cargo ships full of weapons also arrived in Israel from the US. Not satisfied with that, President Biden included $14 billion of military aid to Israel in the package he's trying to get through the House of Representatives. This is nearly 4 times the amount of such aid the US sends Israel in an average year. While it is true that the Biden administration is now pushing for a 6-week pause in the fighting, there is no question but that Biden has armed and financed a campaign that the International Court of Justice itself believes worthy of investigation as possible genocide. It's clear that a ground invasion of Rafah, probably the bloodiest event of the Israeli campaign, would be conducted in large measure with US weapons and financed to a significant degree with US cash. Now, Taoiseach, in not much more than a week's time, you plan to get on a plane, travel to the US capital and join Joe Biden in a day of celebration. You plan to give him a bowl of shamrock on behalf of the Irish people. You plan to pose, no doubt, for photographs with a man who has armed and financed mass murder. That's the truth of it. I believe that that is wrong. I'm confident in saying that large numbers of people on this island think it is wrong also. There are more than 30 million residents of the US who claim Irish descent, many of them whose ancestors fled the kind of famine conditions now beginning to appear in Gaza. 2024 is an election year in the US. You have the opportunity to exert some real pressure here. Tell Biden there will be no shamrock when there is not a total ceasefire and an end to the bloody occupation. Sometimes, Taoiseach, you have to stand up and do the right thing, and I would like you to address these issues because this trip is now, just over a week away.
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks very much, Deputy. I want to use this opportunity once again to reiterate this government's call for an immediate ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. This will allow the hostages to be released. It will allow the killing to stop. It will allow much needed food and medicine to get into the Gaza Strip, where civilians are now in a very desperate and unimaginable situation. And we believe that a humanitarian ceasefire for a number of weeks can then lead to a permanent ceasefire and the resumption of talks on a final status solution. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome the call by US Vice President Kamala Harris for a humanitarian ceasefire earlier in the week to be observed both by Israel and Hamas. This represents a welcome shift in the US position, and I hope we will see this further elaborated on in the days and weeks ahead. We're working closely with our European and Arab partners to build momentum for peace efforts, and we hope that the ongoing intensive talks between the US, Israel, Qatar and Egypt will lead to a ceasefire. We firmly believe that a military escalation in Rafah, where almost 1.5 million people are sheltering in desperate conditions, would be catastrophic and should not happen. And I share the Deputy's horror at the killings of civilians queuing up to access aid. It's important that there be a full independent investigation and that those responsible are held to account. And I would like to note the UN report the other day on the events of October 7th, which confirmed that it is plausible that Hamas engaged in sexual violence and indeed gang rape as part of its attack on Israel. And I hope that those who have not yet condemned Hamas for its actions on October 7th will take the opportunity to do so. In relation to my visit to the White House, which will occur next week, I don't believe in boycotts, Deputy. That's never been the approach that I've taken to international affairs. It is an opportunity to speak to leaders in the US on the Hill, and also President Biden and Vice President Harris. We're one of only 200 countries in the world. There are not many countries in the world that are guaranteed a meeting once a year. It would be a big mistake for us to boycott that and to lose that important engagement that occurs every year since the 1980s. But I will use the opportunity, both in private, in the Oval Office, and in public in the White House, to make clear how the Irish people feel about the situation in Gaza and how we believe the US needs and ought to adopt an approach that will help to bring about a peace settlement in the region.
Thank you. I'll just say, before I ask my supplementary question, that the points I make apply to the Taoiseach and apply to the representatives of the government, but they also apply to all parties in this House. No party in this House, in our view, should attend a celebration with Joe Biden while this Israeli terror campaign is being waged. And that applies to Sinn Féin as much as it applies to Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party. My supplementary question here. You mentioned Rafah, a place with a population, swelling population of 1.5 million people now, a majority of whom are trying to survive in tents. There may be a 6-week pause before you travel to the US. There may not be. There could be an Israeli ground assault on Rafah. Are you seriously saying that if bombs are raining down from the sky on the people of Rafah in their tents, if a ground invasion and the noise and fury of that is taking place outside of those tents, that you will go to Washington and present a bowl of shamrock on behalf of the Irish people to the man who is more responsible than anywhere else on the planet in arming and financing that military force? Are you seriously saying that, Taoiseach? And would you not even for a moment reconsider your position on that?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Deputy, you seem to be a little bit obsessed about the bowl of shamrock, and that takes about 20 seconds. The real opportunity is the sit-down meeting in the Oval Office with President Biden and his team, and also the opportunity to speak in the White House publicly in front of guests of the President and some from the Irish Embassy as well. And that's the opportunity that I will take to reaffirm the importance of our relationship with the US, economic, political, cultural, but also to say that there are issues on which we disagree, and to do so in private and to do so in public, and that's an opportunity that I will take. And I think it would be a mistake of any Irish government to boycott those events. That slot, once lost, is easily transferred to another country and may never return again. And we would diminish our influence in the world if we refuse to meet people and refuse to engage with them, including and particularly allies and friends like the US. And again, Deputy, before I finish up, I'm not going to press you on this again. I'm not going to press you on it later on during Taoiseach's questions, but just for those small number of deputies in this House who haven't unequivocally condemned the Hamas attack on October 7th, I'd invite you again, in light of the UN report, which found evidence of sexual violence in Israeli prisons and also evidence of sexual violence against Israeli women on October 7th at the hands of Hamas to condemn without equivocation the events of October 7th.
Noel Grealish, please, on behalf of the regional.
Taoiseach, I have raised the issue of our bail laws in this House several times in the past, and I feel compelled to do so once again today. That is because, according to the latest figures I have received from the CSO, more than 275,000 crimes have been committed in this country in the past 10 years by people who are out on bail, having been charged with other offences. These crimes range from murders to theft, sexual offences to burglary, and the situation is getting worse. In 2022, for which stats has only recently become available, there were almost 32,500 crimes committed by offenders while out on bail. That is a staggering 41% increase on the total of 10 years previous, and amounts to about 90 crimes every single day of the year. In the past decade, this country has seen a doubling of the incidence of some crimes committed by people out on bail, including attempts or threats to murder, assaults, drunk driving and drug offences. We have also suffered substantial increases in public order offences, up 75%, theft up 72%, damage to property up 53%, and burglary up 50% by these people. Over that 10-year period, recorded crime incidents where at least one offender was on bail included 85 homicides, 268 sexual offences, more than 10,000 attempts or threats to murder and assaults, and also 71,000 thefts, 57,000 public order offences, 26,000 drug offences and 14,000 burglaries, and many more other offences, some of them extremely serious breaches of the law. 1 in every 6 crimes committed in this country is now being perpetrated by somebody already charged with another offence and granted bail to roam the streets to prey on others. Taoiseach, surely this points to a need to radically reform our bail system. Among those stats I have outlined, you can be sure there are many hardened career criminals with hundreds of convictions under their belt who are being allowed to carry on ruining the lives of others. They know that every time they are caught, they will be let out on bail until their case is heard. Taoiseach, when will this government wake up to the reality and seriously tackle the problem of people, very often serial offenders, being granted bail and, as the figures show, have no hesitation in leaving the courthouse and resuming their life of crime straight away? Taoiseach, will you strengthen the laws governing the granting of bail so that the law-abiding people of Ireland are protected by these criminals?
I want to thank the Deputy for raising this important issue again in the House. Above all, I want people to be safe and to feel safe in their homes and on our streets. So we're responding with more Gardaí, better equipment for our Gardaí and stronger laws, more judges and more places in our prisons. The Garda budget has never been higher, 2.3 billion a year. That's up 25% in 4 years. And we're building stronger, safer communities. Bhualam Gameach Dini Sovoilta, agus Gamohian Shid Sovoilta, in Adia agus Ernest Roidna. Marshin Tomade ag Fragart le Nias Mo Gardaí, a trail of Nias Fjord, Darna Gardaí, agus Liha Nias Larger, Nias Mo Brehev, agus Nias Mo Spás a Brizún. Ní Rev Bushaid an Garda Síochána, Riamh Nias Arja. Shin Suas Fihe Cuig Fuingéad Igera Bliana. Agus Thomadig Togáil Publi Nias Larger, agus Nias Sábháilte. I do understand the frustration that people feel with regard to recidivism and repeat offenders. We have to make sure that our laws are as tough as they can be, while acknowledging the fact that over 70% of people who engage with the criminal justice system have mental health issues or addiction challenges. The law in relation to bail is comprehensive and has been strengthened on a number of occasions over the past few years, most recently in 2017 under Minister Francis Fitzgerald. As the Deputy is aware, bail legislation must be built around the constitutional presumption that an accused person is innocent until proven guilty. The presumption of innocence is a cornerstone of our legal system and is a fundamental principle behind the right to a fair trial. and the fact that somebody may have been guilty in the past doesn't mean that they're guilty now. So restricting a person's liberty prior to trial is a very serious matter. Judges are independent in their exercise of their judicial functions, and the decision to grant bail or refuse bail in a particular case is solely a matter for the judge concerned. Among the matters the court can have regard to when deciding whether or not to refuse bail is the persistent serious offending by an applicant, and in specific circumstances the nature and likelihood of any danger to a person or to the community from granting bail. The Bail Act of '97, which followed the '96 referendum, enables courts to refuse bail for a person charged with a serious offence to prevent the risk of another serious offence being committed while on bail. Since then, the bail laws have been further strengthened, specifically by the Criminal Justice Act in 2007, the Criminal Justice Burglary of Dwellings Act 2015, and the Criminal Justice Act of 2017.
Look, 85 murders have been committed by people out on bail over the last number of years, and I do appreciate that some efforts have been made over the years to strengthen the bail laws, but the figures speak for themselves. As I said, more than 32,000 crimes a year are now being committed by people who have been charged with other offences and are out on bail. And more often than not, their court appearances are being totally funded by the taxpayers of this country, who have forked out millions to pay for free legal aid. Free legal aid in criminal cases is costing us more than €76 million a year. That's gone up steadily, up from €64 million in the last 5 years. In 2022, the courts issued more than 81,000 criminal legal aid certificates, again a big jump on the 72,000 total for the 5 years previously. In that 5-year period, the financial payout has been €342 million of the Irish taxpayers' money, where these criminals have contributed absolutely nothing, because they don't have to make any contribution towards the cost of their defence, no matter how many times they have appeared in court. The current system is not doing its job in deterring criminals from offending again. Much stronger action needs to be taken, and a major reform of our bail laws are urgently needed, Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Just first of all, in our engagements with An Garda Síochána, they advise us that the state's amended bail laws have proven to be effective. While there's no immediate proposal to amend the state's bail laws further, we will keep them under review, and certainly if the Gardaí advise us and ask us to make further reforms to our bail laws, we will give that detailed consideration, and certainly in an appropriate way in our engagements with the judiciary. We can say to them that it's important that they honour their responsibilities as well when it comes to making the right decisions on who is refused bail and who is not. In terms of legal aid, there are reforms currently underway being led by the Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, and she is giving examination to a suggestion that the Deputy made previously that perhaps legal aid or the cost of legal aid could be recouped from a recidivist after found guilty. You can't presume that somebody who's accused is guilty and refuse them legal aid, even if they've committed a crime in the past. But if somebody is guilty of recidivism, receive legal aid, there perhaps is the possibility to recoup some of that. It may not have much practical effect where a criminal doesn't have any means, but some of them do have means, quite frankly. And I think it would send a message that will be heard. But again, something that Minister McEntee has under consideration.
Mágad a Taoiseach sin deir initial question on the cheannarí, go with the Raigadi and Kid Peace go Noel Grealish sin Clár Ibre na Seachtaine. I call on the